The first rule of moving to the mountains is that there are no rules. That's the entire glorious point. You trade reliable cell service and the soul-crushing convenience of same-day delivery for the fundamental freedom to walk around your own property naked, wrestling a bear if the mood so strikes you. That was the sales pitch I gave myself when I traded my stock options for 50 acres of Colorado granite and pine. The brochure, however, in its glossy, aspirational splendor, failed to mention the one inescapable ironclad rule of Black Spruce Mountain Estates, Carroll. I was on a video call, patiently explaining to my old business partner for the 5th time why I had zero interest in being a 7-figure consultant for his new crypto AI vegan delivery startup when I saw her. A sensible sedan, the color of beige despair, crunched its way up my long gravel driveway. My driveway was a work in progress. Much like the house, a modern skeleton of glass, steel, and cedar that stood in stark, beautiful contrast to the untamed wilderness around it. I had designed it to have a 360-degree view, which meant, unfortunately, that I had a 360-degree view of Carol Bridgerton marching towards my unfinished porch, clutching a 3-ring binder to her chest like it contained the nuclear launch codes. "Gotta go, Mark," I said, abruptly cutting him off mid-sentence. "There's a situation developing. I think I'm being audited by the fun police." I slid the glass door open just as she was about to press a finger to the non-existent doorbell. "Mr. Jensen?" she asked, her voice as crisp and unyielding as a starched collar. "That's me," I confirmed, leaning against the doorframe. "And you must be Carol. You sent me a 300-page welcome packet that was heavier than my backup generator. I was going to use it for kindling, but I was worried it might violate some sort of Clean Air Act you invented." Her thin lips tightened, a barely perceptible flicker of annoyance. Sarcasm, I was learning, was a frequency she could hear but not comprehend. "I'm Carol Bridgerton, president of the Black Spruce Mountain Estates Homeowners Association." I know, the binder is a dead giveaway. She ignored my observation and got straight to the point, which I almost admired. "I'm here about a violation." She opened the binder, its pages bristling with colored tabs. Her finger, unerring and accusatory, landed on a line of text. Article 7, subsection B, paragraph 4. All exterior refuse containers must be of a pre-approved shade of forest brown or pine green. "Yours," she said, gesturing with her chin towards the large, rolling bin my contractors used, "is black." I looked at the trash can. It was indeed black. It was a perfectly functional, wonderfully unobtrusive trash can. "It's a trash can," I said slowly, as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "It's the color of shadows, the color of the void, the color of my soul after reading your bylaws. It's thematically appropriate." "It's a violation," she repeated, the words snapping in the clean mountain air. "You have 48 hours to rectify it, or a fine of $50 will be levied. A subsequent fine will be issued for each 24-hour period of non-compliance." Before I could formulate a response that adequately conveyed my contempt without getting me arrested, she whipped out her phone. The flash went off with a pathetic little pop in the bright afternoon sun as she documented the offending object. She made a neat, precise notation in her binder with a pen that clicked with terrifying authority, snapped the binder shut, turned on her heel, and marched back to her beige sedan. I stood there for a long moment, watching the dust settle behind her car. I had firewalls that could repel a coordinated cyber attack from a rogue nation-state. I had negotiated multi-million-dollar deals with Silicon Valley's most ruthless venture capitalists, but I was utterly, completely unprepared for this. And so it began. The Great Trash Can Standoff of 2025. It was the first pathetic shot fired in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. A couple of days later, I was standing on the support beams of what would one day be my magnificent deck, looking out over a valley that fell away in a breathtaking sweep of green and gold. My general contractor, Dave, a man whose face was a roadmap of every Colorado winter since the Carter administration, was beside me, squinting at the horizon. "She's got a point, you know," he said, his voice a dry rumble. I turned to him, incredulous. "Don't you start, Dave. It's a trash can." "Nah, not about that," he chuckled, pulling a pouch of chewing tobacco from his vest pocket. "About the view. If you had a brown trash can, it'd really tie the whole landscape together." I recounted the entire bizarre encounter with Carol. Dave just nodded along, packing a wad of tobacco into his cheek with the practiced ease of a master craftsman. He wasn't surprised in the slightest. "Oh, yeah, that's Carol," he said, spitting a brown stream near a pile of scrap wood. "You got the Welcome to the Neighborhood special. Last year she tried to find the Hendersons down on Lot 3 because their wind chimes were, and I am quoting directly from the letter they showed me, melodically non-compliant." "What in God's name does that even mean?" "It means she didn't like the tune," Dave said, shrugging. "They had to take him down. Don't get me started on the Great Garden Gnome Purge of 23. It was a bloodbath. Little ceramic guys with fishing poles and pointy red hats gone overnight. She's got this place locked down tighter than a bear-proof cooler." "How is that even possible?" I asked, gesturing at the vast expanse of my property. "It's a voluntary HOA. I own 50 acres. Her house is half a mile away, through a thicket of aspen. How does she have any jurisdiction over my choice of receptacle?" Dave stopped, smiling. He pointed with his thumb down the winding path of my driveway, towards the single dirt road that connected my property to the main county highway. "The access road," he said, his tone turning serious. "The one you used to get up here? It's technically private property managed by the HOA. She got herself elected president for life about 10 years ago. She controls that road. She controls everything and everyone on this side of the mountain. It's her little fiefdom." He looked me in the eye. "Just be careful, Alex. She feeds on conflict like a vulture on roadkill. And you, with this house," he gestured to the unapologetically modern structure rising around us, "you're a 5-course meal to her." Dave's warning echoed in my head long after he'd gone home for the day. Control the road. Control everything. It was a medieval concept, a strategy pulled from a history book about feudal lords. I had built a digital fortress around my life, insulating myself with wealth and technology, but I was living in a castle with only one drawbridge, and the troll guarding it wore orthopedic sneakers and carried a binder. The proof of Dave's warning came swiftly, delivered by a beleaguered-looking mailman in a series of crisp, vaguely threatening envelopes. The first was a certified letter containing a photograph of my mailbox and a $75 fine. I had commissioned a custom one, a sleek, minimalist box of brushed steel and dark wood that complemented the house. It was, according to the enclosed notice, not the approved rustic log cabin style #3, a picture of which was included. It looked like something you'd buy at a tourist trap, a hideous little log structure with a bright red flag. Apparently, my mailbox wasn't folksy enough. It lacked a certain splinter-giving charm. I was half tempted to replace it with a full-sized, anatomically correct T-Rex head, just to see what subsection she'd invent to cover that. Next came the complaint about light pollution. I had spent a small fortune on architectural lighting, warm, downward-facing LEDs tucked into the soffits that gave the house a soft, golden glow at night. It was subtle, beautiful, and according to Carol, disrupting the nocturnal ambience. I called her, a mistake I would not repeat. "My home is entirely too illuminated?" I asked, reading from her letter. "The natural darkness is one of our community's most precious assets," she replied, her voice oozing with condescending piety. "It's a house, Carol, not a secret government black site. I use lights to avoid walking into trees and becoming a precious asset for the local mountain lion population." "The bylaws are clear," she said. "You have 1 week." The line went dead. The real friction, however, centered on the construction of the house itself. Specifically, my geothermal heating system. It was the eco-friendly, self-sufficient heart of my off-grid dream, but installing it required drilling, trenching, and the occasional piece of heavy equipment. It was a goldmine for Carol. First, it was the noise. Dave's crew worked like clockwork, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday to Friday. But according to a notice taped to my non-compliant mailbox, this violated the Peace and Tranquility Clause, which apparently covered all waking hours. Then, it was the mud. A cement truck, navigating the spring thaw, had the audacity to leave a trail of mud on her precious access road. 2 days later, an invoice appeared in my, still non-compliant, mailbox for $200 for emergency road remediation services. I showed it to Dave, my hands shaking with rage. "She sent me a bill for dirt removal from a dirt road! Where in the hell does she think the road came from? It's made of the very substance she's charging me to remove." Dave just sighed, taking the invoice from my hand. "Just pay it, kid. It's cheaper than the headache. Think of it as the Carol tax. It's like property tax, but with more grammatical errors and a much higher sense of self-satisfaction on the receiving end." I paid it. I hated myself for it, but I paid it. I was building a fortress of solitude, but the moat was being patrolled by a dragon in a floral print blouse. And the seasons were turning. The warm, golden days of autumn were growing shorter, the air sharper. Winter was coming. My state-of-the-art geothermal system was still weeks from being operational. My backup plan, the only thing that would keep my pipes from turning into $1 million ice sculpture and me from becoming a permanent resident of the local morgue, was a massive, gleaming 1,000-gallon propane tank. A tank that sat on the edge of my property, silent, empty, and mocking me with its uselessness. The TV in my half-finished living room was on mute, but the graphics told the whole story. A swirling vortex of angry red and purple was bearing down on a map of Colorado. A banner at the bottom of the screen read, "Widowmaker, historic early-season blizzard to hit high country." The talking heads looked grave. They were forecasting 2, maybe 3 feet of snow in the next 48 hours. Roads would be impassable. Power would be out. It was the kind of storm that made old-timers nod grimly and say, "Yep." My stomach clenched. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number for Rocky Mountain Fuel, my fingers slick with sweat. "Hi, this is Alex Jensen on Black Spruce Road," I said when a dispatcher finally answered. "Yes, I know it's short notice, but the Weather Service is basically predicting the apocalypse. If I don't get that tank filled, my house build is going to be set back by months. And, I added, trying to keep my voice light, I might freeze to death, which would be a real bummer for my contractor's final invoice." There was some typing, a long hold, and finally, a miracle. A driver had a cancellation. He could squeeze me in. He was the last truck they were sending up into the foothills before the storm hit. His name was Frank. He'd be there tomorrow at 10 a.m. sharp. I hung up, relief washing over me in a warm wave. I immediately called Dave. "Good news," I said. "Fuel truck is coming tomorrow at 10. We're cutting it close, but we're going to make it." There was a pause on Dave's end. "Listen to me, Alex," he said, his voice low and serious. "You be down at the bottom of that access road at 9:45. You meet that truck. Carol's been known to run interference with commercial vehicles she hasn't personally approved." "She can't do that," I scoffed. "She can't just block a public utility delivery." "It ain't a public utility, kid. It's a private company. And like I told you, it ain't a public road. You're living in the kingdom of Carol, remember? Her laws are mutable and subject to her mood. Just meet the guy. Trust me." The kingdom of Carol. It sounded like a terrible theme park where all the rides are broken and the churros taste like regret. But Dave's tone had unnerved me. I had a bad feeling, a cold knot in my gut that had nothing to do with the approaching storm. It was a feeling that went beyond a simple fine for an unapproved sconce. This felt different. This felt like a final exam. The next morning was beautiful, in a cruel, ironic sort of way. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, the air so crisp it felt like it could shatter. I was parked at the entrance to the access road at 9:45, my truck's engine rumbling softly. At precisely 10:02 a.m., the glorious, lumbering beast that was the Rocky Mountain fuel tanker rumbled into view. It was huge, white, and beautiful. The driver, a stout man in a greasy baseball cap, gave me a friendly wave. His name, Frank, was stitched on his jacket. He slowed, flipped his turn signal, and began to make the wide turn onto the dirt road. And that's when it happened. Like a predator striking from ambush, the beige sedan swooped in. It moved with an uncharacteristic swiftness, positioning itself perfectly to block the entire entrance. It was a masterclass in passive-aggressive parking. Carol got out, clipboard already in hand, her face set in a mask of grim satisfaction. I was out of my truck before she could even say a word. "Carol, what in the ever-loving hell do you think you're doing?" "This vehicle," she announced, not to me, but to the world at large, "is in violation of HOA regulations regarding gross vehicle weight limits on a private drive. Section 12, subsection F, regarding the preservation of our delicate road surface." Frank leaned his head out of the truck's cavernous cab, his friendly expression replaced by one of pure bewilderment. "Ma'am, I've been delivering propane up this very road for 15 years. This is a standard tanker. It weighs the same as it did last year." "The bylaws were updated last month at the emergency session," Carol declared, tapping a page on her clipboard. "I have the minutes right here. This vehicle exceeds the new limit of 10 tons. It is not permitted." My mind reeled. "Emergency session? What emergency? Did a squirrel look at you funny? Who was at this session, Carol? You and your 3 cats voting over a cup of tea?" "The vote was unanimous," she said, her chin jutting out. "Move your car, Carol," I said, my voice dangerously low. "I will not," she said, puffing up with authority. "The integrity of our community's infrastructure is at stake. If you or your driver attempt to force entry, I will call the sheriff and have you charged with trespassing and destruction of private property." It was a perfect, maddening, airtight trap. Frank, the poor guy caught in the middle, just wanted to do his job. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of pity and impatience. "Look, pal," he said, sighing. "I get paid by the delivery, not the hour. I've got 3 more stops to make in the valley before that storm hits, and they shut down the highways. You got about 5 minutes to sort this out, or I'm gone and you're on your own." 5 minutes. 5 minutes until my only source of heat for the coming winter drove away. The Widowmaker was out there, churning over the plains, a monster of ice and wind. And the only thing standing between me and a winter of frozen pipes and profound misery was a 60-something woman with a sensible haircut and a weaponized sense of self-importance. My blood pressure skyrocketed. A red mist of pure, unadulterated rage clouded my vision. Every passive-aggressive note, every ridiculous fine, every condescending conversation coalesced into a single point of incandescent fury. My brain, The same brain that designed elegant algorithms to solve impossibly complex problems went into overdrive. I wasn't thinking about bylaws. I wasn't thinking about fines. I was thinking about physics. I was thinking about payload capacities and logistical workarounds. And then, as my eyes flickered from Carol's smug, triumphant face to the massive, inaccessible tank on Frank's truck, I looked up. I looked up at the vast, empty, brilliant blue Colorado sky above us. It was a huge, unregulated highway, stretching from my property line to the heavens. A slow, insane grin spread across my face. The rage didn't vanish, but it transformed. It became fuel. It became inspiration. I walked over to Frank's window. "Don't leave," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Pull over to the side of the main road, right there. I have an idea. It's stupid. It's probably illegal in 16 different ways I haven't even thought of yet. But I promise you, it's going to work. My garage is my sanctuary. Less a place to park a car and more of a tech lab masquerading as a storage space. On one wall, a rack of humming servers keeps my digital life running smoothly. On another, custom-built shelves hold everything from power tools and welding equipment to a high-end 3D printer. And in the center of the concrete floor, beneath a heavy canvas tarp, sat my most ridiculous and beloved possession. Every rich guy has a stupid, expensive toy. Some guys buy vintage Ferraris they're too scared to drive. Some buy yachts they use twice a year. I bought a commercial heavy-lift drone, the Etherlift 5000. I'd acquired it at a bankruptcy auction for a failed delivery startup, telling myself it was a practical purchase for property management and future agricultural ventures. Mostly, I just liked flying the beast. It was an octocopter, nearly the size of a smart car, with a carbon fiber frame and 8 powerful rotors. It could haul 400 pounds without breaking a sweat, and had a winch system that was a minor miracle of German engineering. I called it the Skyhook, and its moment of destiny had arrived. I ripped the tarp off with a flourish. The Skyhook sat there, sleek and black and menacing. I slapped the master power switch, and its internal systems whirred to life with a satisfying hum. I grabbed the remote control unit, a complex piece of hardware with dual joysticks, a high-definition video screen, and more switches and dials than a cockpit. My fingers flew across the pre-flight checklist, my mind racing. This wasn't just a whim, it was a calculation. A 1,000-gallon propane tank was impossible, but 1,000 gallons broken down into smaller, manageable units? That was just a math problem. I pulled out my phone and speed-dialed Dave. He answered on the second ring, his voice calm as ever. "Dave, I need you, right now. And I need every empty barrel, container, or vessel you can find on the worksite. And bring your strongest ratchet straps. Meet me at the property line near the main road in 10 minutes. "Kid, what's going on?" he asked, a note of concern in his voice. "Did you finally snap and bury Carol under the foundation?" "The thought has crossed my mind," I admitted, hefting a battery pack the size of a cinder block into place. "But I've got a better idea. She's blockading the fuel truck. We're going airborne." There was a long, silent pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the mental calculus of assessing my sanity. Then came a low, slow chuckle. "I'll be right there," he said, and hung up. This is the part where a normal, well-adjusted person would have stopped. They'd have called a lawyer. They'd have pleaded with Carol. They might have even tried to bribe her, but years of dealing with impossible deadlines, incompetent executives, and the sheer, infuriating illogic of the corporate world had systematically dismantled the part of my brain that suggests caution and restraint. All I had left was the part that says, "Hold my ridiculously expensive craft beer and watch this." I guided the Skyhook out of the garage. Its rotors, still folded for storage, made it look like a giant mechanical insect. I got it to a flat, open patch of land on my property, just over the old wire fence from the county road where Frank was now parked, waiting patiently. Carol, I was pleased to see, was still standing guard by her car, a lonely sentinel of spite. A few minutes later, Dave's dusty Ford F-250 came rattling up my driveway. The bed was loaded with exactly what I'd asked for. A half-dozen empty 55-gallon steel barrels, previously used for construction site cleanup. He got out, took one look at the massive drone I was powering up, looked at me, and just shook his head, a wide grin splitting his weathered face. "You," he said, pointing a calloused finger at me, "are a special kind of crazy, you know that?" "Genius and insanity are two sides of the same coin, Dave," I shot back, flipping the final safety toggles on my remote. "Now help me with these barrels." The plan was beautiful in its simplicity. I called Frank, who was sitting in his cab reading a paperback novel. "Frank, it's Alex. You still with me?" "Ain't going nowhere," he replied, his voice tinny over the speaker. "The show's just getting good. Your lady friend down there is pacing like a caged animal." "Excellent. Frank, how much does a 55-gallon barrel filled with propane weigh?" There was a pause. Let me see. Full barrel. You're looking at around 230, 240 pounds. Why?" "Perfect," I said. "Well within the Skyhook's operational capacity. I'm going to have my contractor roll a barrel over the fence to you. I need you to fill it up." "You want me to what now?" "Just fill the barrel, Frank. We're doing this piecemeal." He hesitated for only a second. I think at that point he was as personally invested in seeing Carol get her comeuppance as I was. "All right, whatever you say, boss. This is already the weirdest Tuesday I've had in 30 years. Dave, a man who could probably rig a suspension bridge with a roll of duct tape and some baling wire, had the first barrel harnessed in under a minute. He expertly wove the heavy-duty ratchet straps into a makeshift sling, cinching them tight and hooking the whole apparatus to the drone's cargo winch. "All right, she's rigged and ready," Dave said, stepping back and giving the barrel a solid thump. "You ready to fly this metal bird?" "Born ready," I said, my thumbs hovering over the joysticks. This was it, the moment of truth. It was a symphony of petty revenge and logistical brilliance. The overture was the rising hum of the drone's 8 powerful rotors as I spooled them up. The hum became a whir, and the whir became a roar that echoed off the mountainside. Carol heard it. Of course she heard it. She stopped her pacing and looked around, her head whipping back and forth in confusion. Her eyes scanned the trees, the road, and then finally they went wide with sheer, uncomprehending disbelief as the ether lift 5,000, my beautiful Skyhook, rose gracefully into the air, a big blue 55-gallon barrel dangling beneath it like a monstrous piece of fruit. I pushed the joystick forward. The drone responded instantly, moving with a steady, eerie calm. I lifted it straight up, 50, 75, 100 feet into the pristine blue sky. Then I nudged it forward. It sailed over the fence line, over the dirt access road, over her pathetically small beige sedan, and directly over her head. She was frozen solid, her mouth agape, her clipboard forgotten at her side. She just stared up at the impossible, majestic sight of a flying propane barrel. For one glorious, beautiful second, I hovered it right there. I imagined the frantic thoughts rocketing through her meticulously organized brain. Is this in the bylaws? Is there a subsection for aerial propane delivery? Did I forget to regulate our sovereign airspace? The temptation to just leave it there, a monument to her powerlessness, was immense. But I had a job to do. With a delicate touch, I guided the Skyhook across the road and over to the designated drop zone on my property, where Dave was waiting with his arms outstretched, like a conductor guiding in an orchestra. I smoothly lowered the barrel to the ground, the winch unwinding with a quiet, efficient whir. It touched down with a gentle thump. Dave had it unhooked in seconds and gave me a thumbs up, already rolling the next empty barrel into position. We fell into a rhythm, a beautiful, efficient, glorious rhythm. Frank, now an enthusiastic co-conspirator, would fill a barrel on the side of the road. Dave would rig it, I would fly it. The whole process was surprisingly fast. 1 barrel from roadside to my property, every 4 or 5 minutes. "You should start a delivery service," Dave shouted over the roar of the rotors as the second barrel landed. "Call it Uber Lyft." "Too much human interaction," I yelled back, grinning like an idiot. After the second barrel landed safely on my side of the fence, Carol finally unfroze. She flew into a sputtering, apoplectic rage. She was on her phone, her face turning a fascinating shade of crimson. She was screaming into the receiver, pointing a trembling finger at the sky, at me, at the drone. But there was absolutely nothing she could do. I wasn't on her road. I wasn't touching her precious, delicate infrastructure. I was using the sky, and she didn't have a bylaw for that. It was, without exaggeration, the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Better than a perfect line of code executing flawlessly. Better than the day my company went public. It was the sight of pure, unadulterated bureaucratic impotence made manifest. She had her rules, she had her binder, I had a F********* ing sky crane. Checkmate. We were on our 5th barrel, a well-oiled machine of defiance, when the inevitable happened. A white county sheriff's SUV came cruising down the main road, its lights flashing lazily in the bright sun. It pulled to a stop behind Frank's tanker. A young deputy got out. He looked to be about 30, with a neatly trimmed mustache and the weary, put-upon expression of a man who has seen too much small-town drama. He took in the scene with a slow, sweeping gaze. He looked at the massive fuel truck parked on the shoulder. He looked at Carol, who was now practically vibrating with righteous indignation, her hand clamped on her phone as if it were a direct line to God. He looked across the fence at me, standing behind my sci-fi remote control, and at Dave, who was casually leaning against a freshly delivered barrel. Then his gaze drifted upward, to the Skyhook, which was currently in mid-flight with barrel number 5. He took off his wide-brimmed hat, ran a hand through his short hair, and let out a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire county. "Okay," he said, his voice loud enough to carry over the drone's hum. "I'm going to need someone to start talking. And please, for the love of God, speak slowly and use small words, because I have a feeling this is going to be a long day." Carol pounced. "Officer!" she shrieked, marching towards him, her binder held out like evidence. "Thank heavens you're here! This man," she jabbed a finger in my direction, "is violating everything. He is flying an unlicensed, industrial thing. He's dropping explosive containers. He is endangering the entire community. Arrest him!" I waited until I had landed the 5th barrel gently beside the others before I responded. I powered down the rotors and walked calmly to the fence line, my remote dangling from its neck strap. "Afternoon, Deputy," I said, giving him a polite nod. "Alex Jensen. Let me clarify a few things from my neighbor here. First, that," I gestured to the now silent drone, "is a registered commercial UAV, fully insured and compliant with all FAA regulations for flight under 400 feet in Class G airspace. I am operating it exclusively over my own private property. Second, I am not dropping anything. I am performing a controlled aerial lift and delivery from a licensed fuel distributor to a private residential tank. As you can see, The barrels are being lowered gently onto my property. No endangerment whatsoever." The deputy, whose name tag read Miller, turned his tired eyes to Carol. "Ma'am, is he flying this UAV over your property?" "Well, no," she sputtered, taken aback. "He's flying it over the road, my road." Miller turned back to me, raising an eyebrow. "Are you flying over the road, sir?" "Technically," I said, enjoying this far more than I should have. "I am flying through the 30-foot public right-of-way that constitutes the airspace above the road, which, as I'm sure you know, is governed by the Federal Aviation Administration, not the Black Spruce Mountain Estates HOA. I checked. A flicker of something. Amusement, respect, danced in Deputy Miller's eyes. He was caught, and he knew it. I wasn't breaking any laws he could enforce. Carol's precious bylaws were about as relevant to federal airspace as they were to the surface of the moon. "So, let me get this straight," Miller said, pinching the bridge of his nose. He turned to face Carol squarely. "You, ma'am, blocked this gentleman's legally scheduled fuel delivery with your vehicle." He then turned to me. "So you decided to fly the fuel over her head, barrel by barrel?" "That's the gist of it, yes," I confirmed with a cheerful smile. "A classic tale of American ingenuity triumphing over petty bureaucracy." Dave let out a short, sharp bark of a laugh, which he tried to disguise as a cough. Miller shot him a warning glance, but the corners of his own mouth were twitching. He turned back to Carol, his official face firmly back in place. "Ma'am, right now, the only person I see breaking a law is you. Your car is illegally parked, creating a traffic hazard by obstructing the shoulder of a county road. And you're using it to illegally block access to a private right-of-way. Technically, I could write you 2 separate citations. I suggest you move your vehicle, now." The color drained from Carol's face. She looked from the deputy, to me, to the drone, and back again. Her entire world, a world built on the unshakable foundation of rules that she alone got to interpret and enforce, had crumbled around her. She had been outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and publicly overruled. Without another word, she spun around, got into her beige sedan, and with a final, withering glare in my direction, drove away. She didn't go far, just 100 yards down the road, where she pulled over and sat, watching. Defeated. Deputy Miller watched her go, then looked back at me. He shook his head slowly. "Try to keep the aerial propane deliveries to a minimum, huh?" he said, finally letting a small smile break through. "The paperwork would be a nightmare." He tipped his hat, got back in his SUV, and drove off, leaving us in a cloud of dust and quiet victory. The storm, the Widowmaker, hit that night with a fury. The wind howled like a banshee, and snow piled up in massive drifts. But inside my half-finished house, a temporary propane-fueled heater roared to life, keeping the pipes safe and the air warm. I sat in a camping chair, sipping a well-deserved whiskey, watching the blizzard through the massive panes of glass. I was safe. I was warm. I had won. A few days later, the world was a pristine blanket of white. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silent, sparkling landscape. Dave was over for a beer, and we were walking the perimeter of the foundation, planning the next phase of construction now that the threat of freezing had been averted. "You're a legend, you know that?" Dave said, his breath pluming in the cold air. "Frank, the fuel guy, has been telling everyone who'll listen down at the diner in town. The story gets better with every telling, too. The last version I heard, the drone was the size of a school bus. You had a leather helmet on, and you were riding it like a bucking bronco." "Let's not correct the record," I said with a laugh. "I like that version better." "Even better," Dave continued, pulling out his phone. "Someone from the house on the opposite ridge got a video of the whole thing. It's all over the county Facebook page. They're calling it the Black Spruce Airlift. He showed me the video. It was shaky and filmed from a great distance, but it was unmistakable. There was the tiny beige car, the massive fuel truck, and my beautiful Skyhook, ferrying its precious cargo through the air. The comment section was a glorious mix of laughing emojis, cries of "Yeehaw!" and declarations of "Stickin' it to the HOA, my hero." I had moved to the mountains for anonymity and isolation. Instead, in my first 3 months, I had managed to become a minor local folk hero. It was the absolute, polar opposite of what I wanted, and I had to admit, it felt pretty damn good. About a week after the airlift, I found a package on my front porch. It was a large wicker basket wrapped in cellophane and tied with an ostentatious gold bow. A fruit basket. Peeking out from between an anemic-looking pineapple and some suspiciously shiny red apples was a small, cream-colored card. The envelope simply said, "The HOA." I took it inside and read the card. It was a masterclass in the art of the non-apology. It warmly welcomed me to the community, again, and expressed a sincere hope for future collaboration and compliance with community standards for the good of all residents. It wished me a safe and tranquil winter. It didn't mention the blockade, the sheriff, or the drone. It was as if the entire incident had never happened. It was, I realized, a white flag, a very, very shaky white flag, waved from a deep, well-fortified bunker. It was a fruit basket that screamed, "I am not sorry in the slightest, but for the love of God, please do not fly any more heavy machinery over my head." It was a truce, or at least a ceasefire. She knew I had a nuclear option now. My weapon of mass defiance was sitting in the garage, and I knew that she was, at that very moment, back in her lair, hunched over her binder, poring over the fine print, looking for a loophole, a new rule, a fresh angle of attack. The geothermal system finally came online in late winter. The house was a warm, silent, self-sufficient paradise. The massive propane tank, now full, stood as a silent monument to my victory, a backup system I hoped I'd never need. I was standing on my newly completed deck, a mug of coffee warming my hands, looking out over the snow-covered valley. The air was clean, the silence profound. I came to the mountains to escape the pointless, soul-crushing battles of the corporate world. Instead, I just found a different kind of battlefield. A smaller one, to be sure, but the stakes, my own personal sanity, felt just as high. Carol hadn't sent another fine. I hadn't received any more passive-aggressive notices about my landscaping choices. A quiet, unspoken understanding had settled between our two properties. A tense peace. Just then, a notification pinged on my phone. It was an alert from the new security camera I'd installed at the end of my driveway. I tapped the screen, and a live video feed appeared. It showed Carol's beige sedan driving slowly past my entrance on the access road. It didn't stop. It didn't even slow down much. It just observed. A silent, rolling patrol. Then it continued on its way, disappearing behind a curtain of pines. I smiled to myself and took a sip of coffee. The war wasn't over. Not by a long shot. This was just a détente in our own private Cold War. She was watching, waiting for me to slip up, to plant a non-native petunia, to use a trash can that was just a shade too dark. But that was okay. I was watching too. And down in the garage, the Skyhook's battery was fully charged. And let her bring on the great wind chime purge of 2026. I'd be ready. After all, a man's home is his castle, and my castle has air support.